Okay. All right. Well, everybody, I'd like to welcome you to the advancement seminar for today, which is going to be, we are looking on the third Thursday of November of 2024. Nice snowy day today, so traffic was so much fun. All right, so that'll be recorded for remembrance in there. All right. Anyway, so what we want to talk about today is we're looking at talking about Life to Eagle Part 2. So we're pretty much looking at from the project all the way through to the end of the the Eagle Scout Board of Review. So that's really the key pieces, the key data we want to look at. So what's kind of all the follow-up paperwork from the actual day of the project, and then what are going to be all the paperwork that we need to do in order to make sure that we are ready to go to our board of review, and then kind of the process, kind of getting that stuff set up in there. All right, and so for anybody who is live, please feel free to type stuff into the chat, or you can raise a hand or whatever it is. I'll keep an eye on those things, and we'll move forward with those pieces in there. All right, so then getting along with this. Okay, so anyway, so first thing, just want to go through and mention in there, and there's a couple of items that that if you watch the first one, I'll duplicate a few of these pieces in here. But this is some of the general information about the rank of Eagle and things going on with that. So first of all, there is a number of different forms that we're going to be referring to, and they are available on the Pathway to Adventure website. If you look at there is a resources tab, and underneath that resources tab, there's a thing for advancement, and there's an item in there that says Eagle. And so those are going to be where take you right to the document pieces in there. The primary pieces that we're really looking at here, we're going to mention in here, is going to be, we'll talk about the project workbook. All right. We'll also look at the actual Eagle Scout rank application, and we'll also come in here with the mention in here about the letter of reference forms. And so we'll go through and we'll kind of mention a few of those items as we move forward with that. All right. So anyway, so here's kind of a screenshot of that information. I think that there's been a slight tweak to it recently with that. Actually, this was a previously recorded Life to Eagle presentation. Then they've all actually been moved down farther into on the page in here. So that's actually no longer at the spot where we're currently at. So that's, I should probably update this to go about and to reflect that particular piece in there. All right. But anyway, so there's kind of our the information. And so as we mentioned in here, project workbook, there's going to be this the application, letters of recommendation, et cetera, and so other different documentation that we have on here with these pieces. All right. So anyway, so a couple things, let's just kind of re-highlight what are going to be some of the different requirements, okay, that what must you do in order to earn the rank of Eagle Scout. And so one of the things that we are referring to here, and then as with all of our different information, okay, we go about here and we look at some different numbers in here, and this is actually referring to a section inside of the Guide to Advancement. So section 9.0.0.0 really talks about the entire Eagle Scout rank. And so oftentimes there will be a number of different slides in which we'll have some of this information kind of coming up. And that's actually referring back to different sections in the Guide to Advancement. Guide to Advancement really is the definitive document that everyone goes about and refers to. When we're trying to deal with this, there's certainly information that might be included elsewhere, web pages, Scout handbook, actually in terms of some of these other documents that we'll bring up. But that's going to be the kind of the ultimate, if there's a question in there, hopefully the Guide to Advancement is the one that should normally have the answer to all those different pieces. And all right. So anyway, so looking at the requirements, so again here, section 9.0.1.1, these are items that need to be completed before the Scout's 18th birthday, all right? And so we're looking at here being active in your troop for 6 months as a Life Scout, demonstrate you live by the Scout Oath and Law, earn a minimum of 21 merit badge, 14 of these are going to be the Eagle required merit badges, okay? Then there's going to be the remaining 7 can be pretty much any out of the any other 7 that you would like to have out of the merit badge list in there, and then hold a position of responsibility related to your unit for 6 months. The big one in here is plan, develop, and give leadership to others in a service project. And then finally, the Scoutmaster Conference. One of the items that I do want to go about and mention on here is that the Scoutmaster Conference, even though most troops and most units go about and always have, okay, that's kind of the last thing to be done prior to the border review. It doesn't always have to be, okay? Most of the time, it's always going to be kind of towards the end as you're going through and dealing with this, but the Scoutmaster Conference does not need to be the actual last item in there. One of the things particularly is that if the scout is still kind of working on a few different things, and particularly if they're pushing their 18th birthday, and they realize, oh, wait a minute, we're coming up to, let's say Thanksgiving break or, or something like that, and Scoutmaster is going to be out of town, so maybe you could go about and should be able to get that done earlier so that there's not an exact time crunch right at the end in there. So those are just a few things to look at that. I know as a Scoutmaster myself, I always prefer to kind of have that towards the end of the process. And vast majority of the time, it is the last thing that needed to get done, but it does not have to be. And so that's kind of an important piece that we want to mention in there. All right. And so if we're kind of looking at kind of this timeline between the life border review and then the Scout's 18th birthday, okay, we mentioned in here that they have to be, it's going to take at least 16 months because that's the time for the position of responsibility and also the time to be active in there for a couple different requirements. But this will go about and often take, 1 to 2 years, sometimes even more, depending upon the scout, exactly how old are they when they have their life border review, how close are they to their 18th birthday. And so I've seen some scouts, finish up and, get their life border review when they were in 8th grade or freshman or something like that, and then take just about up until the time they're 18 until they finally complete their Eagle rank in there. Anyway, so there's kind of looking at those different items, those 6 different requirements that we have in there. If we do look at the rank requirements as listed in the Scout Handbook, there is a 7th requirement, and that is the Eagle Scout Border Review. And so one of the things is that is definitely one that can be done after the Scout's 18th birthday, but there is going to be a time frame. It can't be pushed out forever. And so the earlier, you get it done, the better. There are certainly many unit leaders that I know that have extra gray hairs from scouts pushing all this stuff closer and closer to their 18th birthday. So if you do have the ability to get it done earlier than that, that is your unit leader will thank you very much if you are going to do that. So that is important with that particular piece. All right. So the first thing that we do want to go about, and we're going to talk about here in terms of our, looking at this thing and kind of in this presentation that we're talking about here, is we're looking at the, the completing of the Eagle Scout Service Project. So this is kind of part 2 that we were talking about of the Life to Eagle process. And so in part 1, we'd already talked about a number of the different pieces in there. So if we do kind of look at all these different pieces as a whole, there's first of all determining the project. So we're just looking at kind of what are the sub pieces for the project in there, completing the proposal section of the Scout workbook, getting your proposal approved, completing the planning section of the workbook in there, actually doing the project itself. Then there's a report section in the workbook, getting the final project signatures that says that the project is all completed. Then we start getting into the paperwork of completing the Eagle Scout application, having that verified by council, and then finally we get to go about and end up having the Eagle Scout Border Review. So ideally, is kind of being shown here, we would like the Eagle Scout Border Review to be before the 18th birthday, so everything's all good. We don't have to worry about stuff, particularly if there's a question that is coming up as we're working towards that. There's some time to finish up and make sure that we have all those pieces ready to go and completed in there. Anyway, in the first part of the presentation, Life to Eagle Part 1, we ended up having kind of talking about kind of this first 5 items there on the list in there. And so now what we're going to look in here is going to be these kind of the final 5-6 items. If we're going to have it in there, the project is kind of where we broke the information up in there. So we'll kind of reiterate a little bit about the project before going into the rest of the paperwork in there. All right. So in terms of our Eagle Scout project, let's just kind of review the verbiage again. So this is again, section 9.0.2.0, and it says while a Life Scout. So one of the things that means is that the Eagle Scout service project has to be done, and this means started, etc. After the Scout's Life Board of Review. So if the Scout hasn't done the Life Board of Review yet, they can kind of think a little bit about what their project might be, but they're not really allowed to start the project, okay, the planning, any sort of proposals, things like that, until after the Life Board of Review in there. All right, so it says, while a Life Scout, plan, develop, and give leadership. And so those are really the big three that are going to go on here that need to get done. And so one of the big things that's actually is really nice about the Eagle Project Workbook is that the Eagle Project Workbook is really designed to go about and document and show that the Scout has gone about and done these three things. And so those are oftentimes the big key, the hard three, maybe we'll say the subjective three about how the Scout did on their Eagle Project. All right, so it says here, plan, develop, and give leadership to others. So it means that there has to be a group of other people involved, all right, with the project. In a service project, so some sort of service activity, to any religious institute, any school, or your community. All right, so those are kind of the verbiage that we have to go about here with that. And one final thing is that there is actually a requirement that does go about and say that the workbook, okay, must be used, right? So, and then the workbook goes about and has a few different items in there about how the process should occur. And so those are some items that we do need to go about and make sure we're following those pieces inside of there. All right. So kind of looking at this, I've kind of created maybe 7 different phases of our Eagle Scout service project. We have here determining the project idea, writing up the project proposal, get your project proposal approved, write up your project plan, all right, carry out the project, all right, write up the project report, all right, and then get your completion signatures. All right, and so what we're going to look at here in terms of this particular document and this particular seminar, we're really looking at these last 3 pieces in there. All right, so in the first part, we went through and we got all the way up through writing up the project plan, and we're ready to go into the project. And so we're kind of looking at what are these last 3 steps that we want to go through and look at. All right. So anyway, so here ends up being the, kind of a screenshot of the Eagle Scout service project workbook in there. One of the important things that we end up having with this is that you do need to make sure you're using the latest version when you start. Okay, this is a question that sometimes comes up. Scout is already working on the project. Okay, they've started out, they're working on their proposal section. They've gotten, they've started working on stuff on there, and then there's a new version of the workbook that comes out. Well, if they've already started filling out the workbook, then they can keep that current version. They don't have to go about and transfer everything over to a brand new version on there. So once you've started, you're able to keep that in there. However, most of the time, the reason for a new workbook is because there was something that wasn't as good in the previous workbook. So it almost always is better if you are able to switch over. But this is something in here. But when you're starting, you have to go about and kind of see, okay, what is the latest and greatest? And one of the things is that on our council website, all right, so that's the reason why I have this brought up right here. This will contain the latest version of there. I have known Scouts just to go about and try to search the internet for the workbook, and oftentimes those they don't come up with the absolute latest version in there. And so if that is something that occurs, then the Scout will need to go about and refill out the workbook with that latest version in there. So that is something to be aware of. Make sure you're getting in there. And so going off to that that page that we mentioned on the council website, on our council website, that does have the latest version on there. All right. And so one of the things is that I do also want to mention in here is that some of the images that are going to be used may not be from the most recent version, but any sort of things that was really important to be changed or any updates in there, I did go about and change those around in there. All right. So we do put in here, as we mentioned here, there's 3 different sections of the Eagle Scout Service Project, the workbook in there. And so first there is going to be the proposal. Okay. This is the part that has to be done first. All right. And so again, in part 1, we went through and we kind of went through and talked about that. The next, and one of the things included with this is part of the instructions. It also does go about and give some highlights on what are some different ideas with this. So it says how we would, begin work on your project. Okay. Only after your proposal has been fully approved and you have finished your project plan in there. All right. So one of the things that this is going about here and is mentioning, we want to kind of note the steps. We're required to go about and use the workbook. And the workbook does go about here and specify that first we need to write up the project proposal. Then there needs to be the approval of the proposal. Third, there needs to be the write-up of the project plan. And then fourth, we actually go about and get to do the actual project. So those other 3 steps are actually required by the workbook, which is required by the guide to advancement. So those can be things that has to be done as we move forward, in terms of our steps in here. So those are a few things to note in there. All right. So we're mentioning here the project proposal. Okay. The next thing that we want to mention here is part 2 is the project plan. And again, details of what's kind of looking at that as we go step by step. That was covered in part 1. All right. And so one of the things it does mention in here with kind of our project plan talks about here, kind of showing about here that, hey, we must plan and develop your service project. That is really important with that. And this tool, okay, the Eagle Scout project workbook was really designed to go about and to document that the Scout actually did planning and development on there. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably nearly impossible to go about and properly fill out the Eagle Project Workbook and really not to have completed the plan and the development requirements of the Eagle Scout Service Project requirement for the rank of Eagle. All right. So those are some things there that we really don't want to mention in here. It's important because actually one of the things that happens is that one of the big questions during the Eagle Scout Board of Review is trying to go about here and determine, did the Scout actually do planning, development, and also showing leadership to others during their project? And if the Board of Review realizes or comes up and says, no, we don't think that the Scout did, that's going to be a reason for a Scout not to successfully complete their Board of Review. And that is certainly something that we do not want to have occur. We want to make sure that when the Scout is going into that Board of Review, that it's, that there's it's a slam dunk going through, that they're going to go about and successfully complete everything. So working out the Eagle Scout Service Project is very important to making sure that happens in there. All right, so those are some stuff we want to mention in there. Okay, so anyway, so we mentioned here about the proposal section, now the plan section, okay? And so one of the things is that oftentimes comes up, and so now we're kind of getting into where we're up to this. We're at the days of our project, and you're now ready to carry out the project. So you've gone about and you filled those other 2 sections. One of the questions that always comes up, it talks about here, well, how much detail really did I need to do in that planning section? And it has always been shown that the better detailed that the project plan is, okay, the easier the days of the project go. All right. The better the plan, the better the execution. Nobody is ever going to argue that piece in there. Okay. And so one of the things is that oftentimes people say, well, how much detail should I have in there? And a good rule of thumb that a lot of people will go down here is ideally, if someone else can use your project plan and then carry out the project without flaw, that's the amount of detail that we're really trying to get in there. All right. Now, part of this thing, someone says, well, wait a minute, no one else is going to do this. It's going to be me who's going to carry this out. Why do I need to write all the stuff down here? Well, part of the thing is that if we do actually go about and look at some of the ideas about really what is the purpose of the Eagle Scout Service Project, yes, part of the purpose is to go about and to do service, okay? But another part, and actually probably the primary part, is really for the Scout to get that experience in terms of doing that planning, that development, that showing that leadership to others. Do that as get that experience, gain that experience by doing this. So when they get to a job, when they come up with something that they're trying to do, for fun or for, they're trying to, update something or whatever it is, maybe they're trying to fix something around their house or their parents' house or something like that. They've kind of got an idea about what it takes to go through a large project and how to pull it off and how to make sure they are successful at it. Right. So those are a whole lot of things that they want to do in here. And so while this particular project, the Eagle Scout Service Project, will be carried out by the Scout themselves, it doesn't mean that future projects that they might be involved with, they may not actually be involved with it 100% in there. So those are some things that, we're planning and we want to make sure occurs as we deal with all these things. All right. So anyway, and the other thing else that we do want to remember in here is that, because we mentioned in there kind of the idea about the planning and development, but there's also that idea about give leadership to others. Okay. So the Scout's going to be the one who needs to provide that leadership. And this also includes the leadership of any adults. And so this is oftentimes one of the things that the Scout might have trouble with, is that they're very used to going about and kind of following the lead of the different adults who might be involved in their unit. But in this particular one, the adults need to kind of follow the leadership of the Scout in there. Now, certainly the Scout can go about and solicit advice, and adults can offer ideas, okay? But that final leadership responsibility, the final decision, falls to the Scout. All right, so those are a few things we want to make sure that we think about here as we're going about and working on the project with that. All right, and then another item that we also want to make sure that we do is that we do want to go through here and remember that that this is the BSA youth protection policies need to be in effect, all right, during the project itself. Okay, so this means that as we start looking about this, 2 registered adult leaders, okay, 21 years of age or older, are required at all Scouting activities, including meetings, including projects in there. And also, if you're going to have any sort of female youth involved, this means that you also have to have a registered female adult leader, 21 years of age or older. Okay, so those are some things that we need to think about as we're going through and working on, the project in there. We need to plan for that. And so there's kind of the link in there. Okay, the scouting.org training youth protection. If anybody has any questions or follow up, how that all gets to place in there. All right. So with that, we assume that the project is gone. Everything's been taken care of. We pulled it off. We followed the plan that we had already gone about and created. Now what we want to do is we want to dive into the report. Okay. So there's going to be in here. So we're going to start looking at this first section that we want to go through and start filling out. All right. And so this is going to be, actually, I should say this last section, because the other first 2 sections we already went through and talked about in part 1. So part 2, the real big section we're going to talk about here is going to be this report section. All right. So the first thing is we start looking at the report. It kind of gives in here just some basic logistics. Okay. What's planned was completed. When did work begin? When did it finish in here? The next thing in here talks about the project description. And again, this is each part of the section, each of the 3 different sections has a part where it talks about give a project description in there. And I've certainly had Scouts say, well, I got to fill it out 3 times. Well, it could have changed. Okay. And so then as you're going through and you're dealing with this, you get a better idea about what has happened in there. And in all honesty, one of the things with this is that it does talk about, what you did after the proposal was approved to complete the planning of the project. So here's kind of an idea about, hey, how did you go about and what was your planning in there? And many Scouts, it's going to be, well, I worked down and filled out the workbook. It's going to be part of it, but I'm sure that there's other stuff that was going to be in there. Many Scouts, particularly if they're going to be building something in there that they're going to work on, particularly if they're building multiples of them, they might go about and say, oh, well, we went through and we kind of built one of them, so we got a feel about how it was done. So we knew how better to go through and lead everybody else when we're going to build the rest of them in there. All right, so again, so here's going to be page A with some of the equipment in there. Other things that we want to go in here, and we start talking about not so much what we did, but how did we felt it went? Okay, so what went well? What was challenging? What were kind of the high points and the low points in there? Were there any sort of changes, okay, that you needed to make from the original proposal? Okay, and what significant changes did you make and why? What were those changes that had to go there and put inside of here? One of the things that I always talk about here when we start looking at this report section is that the questions that we're asking in here, things like what went well, okay, what was challenging, okay, what changes did you make? Those are going to be questions that oftentimes come up and is asked during the Eagle Scout, the board of review. All right, when their scout is in the board of review and the different members of the board start asking questions, these are some common questions that come up with that. Now, the thing that's really nice about this is we almost treat this report section as almost like the notes in there. Basically, if we're going to take a test, what are some notes? You got some answer sheet that you're allowed to bring into the test in there. That's kind of what this is. The Eagle Scout Service Project Workbook is one of the documents that the Scout is to bring into the board of review. And so as they're going about and doing this, if all of a sudden the Scout kind of draws a blank as to how do I answer this? What goes on there? Well, if you got the documents right there, refer to the documents. Say, yeah, it's written in the documents. Let's find the page where it actually says where this is happening at. And so those are great things that the Scout can go about and use to go about, particularly if they're nervous or just draw a blank, whatever the case might be in there, to go through and fill this out in there. So again, this whole thing in there is kind of really helps the Scout develop kind of what their mindset is, what their thoughts are. And again, how did the project go? What happened? And what are some questions that are going to be asked during that board of review? Again, this is that they're asking this so we can look at, hey, did the Scout do planning? Did they do development? Okay, was there leadership to others? And so here's going to be some things where we'll go about and hit on those pieces in there. And talking about leadership to others, on the next page on here, page B, it actually just talks about all these different things. How did you demonstrate leadership? What was difficult? What was rewarding? What did you learn about leadership? All right, so those are some things that was going to be asked about this. All right, the next section that we have down here talks about material, supplies, tools, and it says, were there any significant shortages, okay, or overages, all right, of material, supplies, etc. Right. So we're really looking at here, this is kind of a critique of how well was the planning? Okay, how well was our development? Did we really have what we wanted without going overboard? All right. And so those are some good things that come up with that, because then that goes about here. And, it says that there was planning and development. Doesn't mean that the Scout was perfect in their planning and development. That's never a requirement of the Eagle Scout project, but they're supposed to do this. And so this is kind of giving them that feedback. How well did they do? And the other answer, the other part with this kind of comes down here that sets it up where the purpose of the project, one of the purposes of the project is to make sure that they understand how to go about and do similar projects, okay, in the future. What are the steps that they need to do here? And so by asking some of these questions, really kind of turns into, what was some of the lessons learned from this project? All right. Now, another thing that we also have in here is that there is the information about how much hours were spent. Okay. And so a couple of these things in here is mentioned in here that we want to make sure that the Scout includes the time that they spent, and also not only the time spent working on the project, but also the time spent planning. Those are important pieces of information with that. And so as we go through here in Scout, looking at this information, figure out how many hours the Scout worked, okay, how many different BSA registered youth were there, the hours but they were in there, how many other youth might have been in there, basically people who were not members of the BSA. What about registered adult leaders? What about other adults? Okay. And then kind of putting in here what might be the total number of workers, total number of hours that we might have in terms of our project. All right. There's not necessarily a minimum that we're looking for in terms of this with this, but this is just something that needs to be documented, needs to be recorded. And part of the application, okay, the total number of hours is actually asked to be listed on there. And part of that thing is that that goes about and is actually recorded in terms of the national database for the Scouts. And so when they start looking about, okay, how many service hours has the organization, the scouting organization done, some of that information is being done through these Eagle projects, some of those hours that they're counting. And so it's really important in order for us to figure out, hey, how many different hours did different people do, that you do go about and you have some sort of a sign-in sheet, okay, that you keep track of those hours in there. Also, as you're going about and doing your development, as you're planning, okay, how many hours did the scout work? So not only worrying about the hours of the actual project in there, but all that time putting it together, doing all that documentation, meeting with different people, shopping for the materials that you might need, etc. Those are all things that should be recorded, okay, and looked at and maintained in here, because those are all things that get involved with the project in there. And scouts are going through and looking back at this later, they realize, yeah, these projects there's a lot going on to these projects in here. All right. Now, last thing that's kind of or next thing I should say is on here is talking about the money. How did you go about and pay for your project? And so there was in both the proposal and the planning section kind of talking about how do you plan to get your money. Well, again, this is just kind of the summary. Okay, so now instead of how do we intend to, how did it actually go? Right? Did you get enough money? Did you go about, how much was collected? How much money was gone about and spent? What did you do with any excess that was happening there? There actually is some guidelines from the BSA about what happens with that. The money's either supposed to go to be donated to the beneficiary, return to the donors. Those are some of the things that was going to happen in there. That's kind of the guidelines of the BSA. Also asking questions in here. Hey, how did you end up thanking your different donors? All right, so those are some different things that was happening with this. All right. And then once we get kind of at the end of the thing in here, there's you need to go about and have basically the project approved in there. Okay. One of the things that we should notice on here when we start looking at the signatures, note that there's actually not a council signature at this point. Okay. The council signatures kind of comes up with the Eagle Scout Board of Review. Okay. But so included with this one here is that the candidate, basically the Eagle Scout candidate, they're signing it off and they're saying, yes, I believe that I properly executed the project as I have reported it here. Next, there's also going to be the beneficiary. So the beneficiary has to go back and say, yes, that the scout completed the project with that. And then the last signature in here is going to be the unit leader. All right. So those are going to be the people on here. And so one of the things that we should kind of notice inside of here is that the unit leader signature that we're mentioning, okay, is that one of the things that we had kind of identified, okay, and so if we do look at this, the verbiage it says here where it starts talking about the approvals, okay, in my opinion, the Eagle Scout Service Project meets requirement number 5 as stated on page 4 of this workbook. Okay, so what does this actually mean? Well, the unit leader is actually not a member of the Board of Review. Unit leaders are not allowed to be members of the Board of Review, but this signature is basically where your Scoutmaster goes about and says, yes, I believe that the Scoutmaster agrees that you completed the Eagle Scout requirement number 5 to plan, develop, and give leadership to others in a service project. So one of the big things that the Board of Review, that the members of the board have to figure out is, did the scout properly do this? And so this signature is going to be where the unit leader is basically saying, yes, I believe that they did. So that really carries a lot of weight, okay? And so it's very important that we go about and have that signature in there. All right. Also, maybe not as I don't want to belittle the signature of the beneficiary. Okay, the beneficiary says, yes, I'm very pleased with the work. I think the scouts all done, did everything with this. They may not necessarily understand all the details about Eagle Scout requirement number 5, this plan development, give leadership to others. But it certainly would go about here and says where the beneficiary thinks, yes, the project was done, but the unit leader is really saying it was done to the level as required for the rank of Eagle Scout. And that's an important piece to put in there. All right. So now we've gone about here, and that's actually the last thing that we actually had in terms of the Eagle Project workbook. All right, so those last signatures, those are the last pieces in here. Now what we want to do is we want to start looking at what are the other things that we need to do in order to go about and get ready for the board of review. And the big thing with that is basically the completion of the Eagle rank application. All right, so there's kind of a picture of it right there that we have in here. And again, on the website, there's a link to that particular document in there, and it's a fillable PDF form. Okay, and so a couple things in here is that if we look at the different parts, there's kind of this personal record information about who the scout is, what's their scout BSA ID, when dates they became joined scouting BSA, what we're going to be. Were they a Cub Scout? Were they a Weeblo Scout? What were different dates of different boards of review? First class board of review, Star Scout board of review. When was their life board of review? Those are all information that we want to put in here. All right. Another thing that's also in here is that on the first page of this, there's a section in here for a number of letters of recommendation. All right. Now this actually falls under, and this is kind of what the board ends up using for looking at requirement number 2, which is to has the scout lived by the scout oath and the scout law? And so in most boards of review going up through the ranks, the scout is normally asked this question in some way, shape, or form. The scout answers it, gives the answer themselves with that. However, here in the Eagle Scout Board of Review, the scout is to go about and ask for letters of recommendation that go about and attest to how the scout has lived the scout oath and law. And so there's a number of different things in here. They look at whether there's going to be a letter from the parents, letter from some sort of religious affiliation, some educational group, an employer, if you have one, and then 2 other references that the scout can go about and kind of pick up in there. So we're looking at a total of up to 6 different references that could be done. Okay. So those are some things with that. Now, a few things that every now and then is that a scout may not necessarily belong to a religious group in there, and so may not have a pastor, rabbi, priest, something along those lines that they could go about and talk to. And so one of the things is that the BSA goes about and suggests is that there's another family member that knows the scout very well. So oftentimes if they're, for one parent is going to fill out the top letter of recommendation, and then the other parent is filling out the one addressing kind of the scout's religious background, how well they lived up to, the 12th point of the scout law. All right. And then also the other thing down here at the bottom, it goes about and it mentions that we have what are going to be the dates of all the different merit badges. All right. And so now on here, it actually has the dates that the merit badge was earned. All right. And so these, this information, normally the troop advancement chairperson can go about and get that information. Also, this information is available through internet advancement, through Scout Book, etc., that the scout can go about and can find that information out there. All right. One of the things is that as the scout is moving ahead, they should go about and verify that they actually have completed all those different merit badges prior to filling out here and filling right into the last piece in there. Oftentimes as a scout is soon after their life board of review, they should double check and verify that that information is there. I actually had a scout in my unit in which we were up at summer camp, and we were 3 months and 2 weeks prior to the scout's 18th birthday, and found out that one of the 3-month merit badges the scout had not actually completed. The scout thought they had completed that particular merit badge, but it's like, oh, there's no requirement here. And then, so fortunately, it was 3 months and 2 weeks. Okay, so plenty of time for the scout, got it done, knocked it off, got the Eagle. Wasn't an issue with that. But that if it had been 2 months and 2 weeks, the scout would not have been able to complete the rank of Eagle Scout. So do make sure you double check on this. Again, the scout just thought they had finished up and started working on those things. And it was, I can't remember what it was, personal finance or personal management or personal fitness. And they got the 2 merit badges kind of confused as to which one was there. And so that was what had happened on that one. All right. Now, another thing that's also being mentioned on here is that there's a couple of different things on this form here where we're talking about the merit badges, where there are some Eagle required merit badges that you have some options for. Okay, so if we're talking about here swimming, cycling, hiking, those are one of them in there that we have in with that environmental science sustainability. That's another piece that's going to go on here. So there's basically one spot for those in there. And so what the scouts should do is the merit badge that they didn't earn, that they're not counting as their 14 required merit badge, that it should be a line that would go through and fill those out. All right. So here's going to be this form of the letter of reference. So let's kind of take a note about this letter of reference form with this. This is going to be, again, this is a form that the BSA has provided. This is actually available through the council website in terms of those different resources that we had for the Eagle resources in there. If we kind of look at the first page, okay, there's not really a whole lot of it's not really anything special. It just says, hey, here's kind of some of the candidate. What's your relationship with this candidate? The length of time you've known the candidate. And then it has a spot for the scout or the reference writer, the letter writer, to go about and to fill in their information with that. And then some spot for a signature on there. All right, pretty simple. This form is not actually required that they go about and use it in here. Also, if they have, additional information, you can go about and attach it in here. The main thing that I always go about and say about this letter of reference and this form in here is that on the second page, so the second part right here, the important part of this particular form is it kind of goes about and tries to talk about what is the real purpose of this letter, because there could be the person who's writing this may not be very familiar with scouting. All right. One of the things is the example I almost always go about in using this is there's supposed to be a letter from someone from the Scouts education, someone from their school. All right. So let's say the scout goes about and asks their math teacher, hey, can you fill out this letter of reference for me? The letter of reference going to the, for the Eagle Scout Board of Review is not about how well the scout did in math. Okay. Hopefully the scout's doing well in math and that works out well with this, but it's about how well the scout lives up to the scout oath and the scout law. And so there's a description of what those things are. It actually also comes out here and kind of tells the letter writer that this is the purpose of this letter in there. And so it goes about and really helps the letter writer as to what this letter is supposed to be focused on, what's going to be the point of this letter. All right. The other thing that's also mentioned here is that per the BSA, this letter is actually, once it's been filled out, is actually not to go back to the scout. It's supposed to go back to somebody in the unit, unit leader or some designee of the unit leader, who will collect it and then get these letters to the Eagle Scout Board of Review. And so there's a big section inside of here that actually contains, okay, who is supposed to get this letter after it's filled out in there. So it goes through and has that information in there. One of the things is that the BSA and the Guide to Advancement goes about and highly encourages is that the scout provides a stamped, addressed envelope that goes along with this letter, so that after the person has gone about and filled out that letter, they can put it into the envelope, send it off, and so it goes right to the person. So it makes it simple and easy for the person writing that letter of reference. So those are some things that we do want to go through here and mention with this letter of reference in there. Okay, now a couple things that we also do want to mention with this is that the section 9.0.1.7 does talk about here that these references need to be contacted. And so the scout, it is their responsibility to make sure that they ask these different people to go about and provide the letter of recommendation. The scout is required to go about and do this. So you mentioned here, you can use the letter of recommendation form or just write something else or both, however, whatever the person who's writing the letter wants to do on there. Okay, I encourage using that form because it does go about here and fill in that information. So it gives that information there with this. Okay, the letter does not go back to the scout. Okay, it's supposed to go back to either a unit leader, committee chair, some designee. It could be the DEC, basically the person from the district who is working with this. Whoever's going to be as coordinated with the DEC with the scout. So those are things that we want to make sure happens with this. Okay. And so the scout must go about and provide the address of where it's going to be sent, whether this is the committee chair, your unit leader, some other designee in here. And again, provide this addressed stamped envelope is a great thing to go about and to have in there. All right. So those are importance with this, that it is up to the scout to make sure that they contact the person. Okay. They tell them where it's going to go to, and they provide the the form, somehow this information about what this the letter writer needs to do in order to get that form in there. Okay. And at this point, the scout doesn't actually have to do anything further. One of the things that might occur is that, well, this person actually may not write the letter. And so in the different boards review that I have been on, rarely have I gotten all 6 letters for a scout in there. So normally, somebody doesn't get around to writing the letter in a timely enough fashion for it to be there at the board of review. And so that's okay. Okay. The scout has to make the ask. However, they're not to go about and be kind of held back or anything like that, if the letters don't come in. All right. So in terms of this here, as we mentioned here on the rank application, there's going to be this personal record, which includes board review dates, different positions of leadership held and those dates in there, the dates of merit badges, when they were earned. Okay. And then in terms of this records, okay, as we mentioned in here, the troop advancement chairperson can go about and normally help with that information here. And the other thing is that also in terms of Scout Book, this has actually been a great thing that Scout Book has, is they actually have the ability to generate a report, okay, that has all this information on them, on there. Also, this information is also available in Internet Advancement as well. All right. So here's going to be kind of a thing in terms of Scout Book. Okay. So we're looking at here underneath there. So I'm in the Scouts advancement information. And so at the bottom of this, there's a spot in here where it talks about the different reports. Okay. And so if you click on that, it comes up with the different reports. And there's going to be this spot where it says, hey, let's generate this Eagle application. And so what'll happen with that is that this will go about and generate the fillable PDF format with the information that is known, all right, from, that is maintained by the BSH database. So this is going to be dates of board of reviews, dates of merit badges earned, the scout's address, okay, all those different things. If a unit is going about and keeping track of inside of Scout Book of the different positions of responsibility held, that information will be filled in as well, okay? And so those are going to be things that are all going to be out there. So I always go about and encourage people to take advantage of that, that ability in Scout Book to go through and to look at that information. And I said here, this is also a really good way, all right, once the scout has basically recently gotten their Eagle Scout or they're finished up their life board of review, as they're starting to work towards the rank of Eagle Scout, that you can see, okay, here's what we have recorded that you have done. Is this correct? All right. So those are some things to go about and deal with that. And looking at this from this particular form works out really nicely on it. All right. Now, this is going to be page 2 of the Eagle Scout application. A couple things that page 2 has in here. It does have the information for the position of responsibility. It also has information about the what was the Eagle Scout project and how many hours the scout worked on here. But the other thing that's going to be maintained in here is that it has a number of different signatures. All right. So these are all the different signatures that need to be done. One of the first signatures that needs to go on here is the signature of the scout. And this is going to be where the scout goes about and says, yes, I am saying that I believe that I have properly completed all the different requirements for the rank of Eagle Scout. Next on here, there is a signature for the unit leader. All right. And one of the things that is actually kind of put on here is that most of the time the unit leader will go about and fill this out and for the date of the Scoutmaster Conference, but the Scoutmaster Conference doesn't have to be the last thing. So sometimes it could be done beforehand, and the unit leader will go about, maybe the scout hasn't completed all the other requirements yet. Maybe there's still an outstanding merit badge or something like that that the scout is working on. All right. So then that signature can come in later. But this is basically saying that the unit leader also believes that the scout has gone through and completed all the different requirements. And then one more signature from the unit is basically looking here at the committee chair. All right. So from the unit, there's the scout, the unit leader, and then the committee chair. All three of those people need to fill out the form and says, yes, we believe that the scout has gone about and completed all the requirements for the rank of Eagle. All right. And so we mentioned in here, do make sure that we go about here and have this again with the latest form. Okay. So there's going to be the most recent form for the workbook, also the most recent form for the, to be filled out here for the application. So those are important that we go through and deal with this. I think that on this one, the form date on that is actually on the back of the form, not on the front. So that's why I kind of showed here down at the end. All right. Now, one item I do want to go about and mention with this, in this spot, around where the scout, the signature of the applicant, the signature of the scout in here, there's a statement that needs to be filled out in here. And this statement goes about and talks about here where there's these attachments that is mentioned in here in section 9.0.1.3 of the Guide to Advancement. And the big thing in here is that it's always referring to this statement on the application. And I oftentimes just refer to this as the hidden Eagle Scout requirement, because the only place where you actually find it is on the application there. It's not in any handbook or anything like that. All right. And so the statement here says, in preparation for your board of review, prepare and attach to your Eagle Scout rank application a statement of your ambitions and life purposes and a listing of positions held in your religious institution, school, camp, community, and other organizations in which you have demonstrated leadership skills. Include honors and awards received during the service. All right. So this is kind of oftentimes this life statement. That's the most common way that a lot of people refer to this on here. And so this is actually an item that is required, okay, to be filled out by the scout before they can have their Eagle Scout Board of Review. All right. So that's important that we have in here. All right. Now, the most thing with this is that many scouts, particularly they're doing this as they're, in high school. Many of them, as they're getting older in high school, some of them are considering or have friends that are looking at going to college. And oftentimes they're very aware of, there was this thing, a college letter, a statement that's going to be written about them, that they're going to write about how their life was, what are some things that were important to their life that can help them get into the college of their choice. Well, the statement here, this life statement here, is basically the BSA version of the college letter. All right. And so that's oftentimes the way I'll go about and describe it to scouts. And so I often tell them, okay, well, if you are filling out, a college letter, either the life statement becomes the rough draft for your college letter, or your college letter was your rough draft for your life statement here. So they're kind of very similar to each other. Okay. This one here is probably going to contain a little bit more heavy, a little bit more focused on some of the ideas of scouting, okay? But they certainly have definitely some overlap between these two pieces in there. All right, so this is going to be an item that is required that gets turned in. All right, and so when we talk about this being turned in, we have to go about and submit the application to the Council Service Center. All right. And so one of the things that's happening with this is that before the board of review can be set up and go forward with this, is that council has to verify that everything's ready to go. All right. And so there's a bunch of documents that we do go about and need to turn into council for them to look at. But we always want to make sure that we get a copy of these things that before we turn them into council, just in case something happens, they get lost or whatever it is. So we have them around here. And so the main thing that we want to look at in here is going to be, there's this Eagle Scout rank application. And again, with that statement, requirement number 6, we just talked about in there, that life statement. All right. The Eagle Scout service project workbook, where everything is completed with signatures. All right. That's an item with this. And then any sort of other attachments that might be in there. One of the big things in terms of these attachments is that if there's any sort of photos, okay, that Scout wanted to include from the, from their like before and after photos of their project, those are great things as kind of other attachments. That's kind of the main thing that they want to look at in here. All right, so we have to go about here and deliver the originals to the local BSA service center. So in Pathways to Adventure Council, okay, we have 4 different service centers in here. There is the one downtown, there is the one in Hammond, okay, or Munster, actually, technically it's in Munster, not Hammond. Then there is the one in LaGrange and the one in Arlington Heights. So those are the 4 service centers, okay, for Pathways to Adventure Council. All right. And so one of the things is that we also want you to go about and use, there's an envelope that that our council is using to kind of track this stuff in here. This is oftentimes referred to as a golden envelope. I got a photo of it on the next page, I believe, the next slide. We'll go through this. Oftentimes, this is going to be given at the proposal approval meeting, okay, to the scout. If the scout, there could be some time between it's ready to be submitted to council and when that proposal occurred. If you are not able to find that envelope, they do have extra copies of it at the council service center, so you can just bring all the documents there and then fill them all at that point. But it's actually much nicer to get that done beforehand. Okay, and so there's going to be some of the people, one of the persons particularly at the Arlington Heights office, who can go about and kind of deal with this. The information with the council, how we do this, everything used to always get transferred up to a certain location with that. The council has now been going about and kind of trying to keep it all done locally in there. All right. So I just kind of put in one of the main contacts inside of it. And Kathy, who's up at the Arlington Heights office, is very personal, can go about if anybody has a question with that. She's able to kind of take and help on scout, even if you dropped it off at, let's say, at the the Munster office or something like that. Okay, so anyway, so here's going to be the special envelope. Okay, this one in terms of the picture here looks a little bit more kind of a normal, manila envelope type thing in there. The latest ones actually kind of got a little bit more of a neon yellow look on that. All right, so we go about here, and so inside of this envelope, we want to make sure that we have in here our completed workbook, this information that we're going to have in here, the application, okay, the statement in here. And one of the things is that if we can't remember all these different pieces, on the front of the envelope, it actually tells you, hey, what do I need to submit? And it's right here in terms of this, this item that I now have circled over that envelope. It says for your first turn-in, okay, so this is the turn-in prior to the board of review where we're going about and getting everything verified, okay? It says here, you need to submit in these items in here, the completed Eagle workbook, the completed Eagle application with the statement for requirement 6, which is that life ambition statement that we mentioned here. It also goes about and mentions in here a checklist, and the checklist is actually these items that is on the outside of the envelope. So that's kind of the checklist piece in here. So if you have the envelope, you got the checklist, you don't have to worry about that in there. All right. Now, the next thing we also want to mention in here is that on this envelope, there's going to be this QR code. All right. So this QR code takes you to a Google form that that council is kind of overseeing with this. And it has the information that the scout, that council needs from the scout in order to properly process the information there. So it talks about what is the scout's name, what troop are they in, what's the scout's, their BSA ID number, and all this information is either information that's either on the application or is on the workbook in there. So there's a number of different spots that needs to be filled out in there. This is something that was somewhat recently added into the process. Prior to us doing this, it was required somebody in terms of council would go about here and every single Eagle Scout envelope that got turned in, okay, they would have to go about and find that information and type it all in. And the turnaround time was well over a month in order for council to go about and verify the process. Most of that time was actually being spent just entering in this information, getting this needed information in. By going about, once we've kind of switched over to this QR code, it's about 2 weeks. Actually, I've even had people go about in here, oh yeah, I got the information back in 3-4 days. All right. When they've gone about and been able to process everything in there. So that's been able to cut down on this delay, okay, in the overhead that goes with that. And so that's overall a good process in there. The other thing that I also note about this is that in terms of the QR codes, okay, as the scout is filling it in, there's also some email information that needs to be filled out in there. And so particularly for notifying the scout themselves, what is their email address? There was often times in which the person who was trying to fill out the form, based on the handwriting that was done in the workbook, okay, where they couldn't really read the email address. And so they kind of did their best guess, but got a letter wrong or something like that. And so that was really hard for the scout to be notified. And so this ends up being, scout knows their own email address. They can type it in with that. And so those are things that have been very important and worked out real well in terms of moving forward with this. The amount of kind of mistyped information has been decreased. The overall efficiency of the process has been increased. So that's great in terms of what's happening with this. All right. So anyway, so we're submitting this into council. Okay. Purpose is that council needs to verify the application. All right. So right now we're kind of looking at kind of this 2 to 3 weeks for paperwork review. That's it seems like it's been a little bit faster than that recently, so that's been great. Okay, pretty much everything ends up being checked against the council records. What are some of the dates of the merit badges, et cetera, making sure that all the different, kind of the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. That's really what's going on with this. And so if there are any incomplete or inaccurate information, this must be reconciled. So they go about there and they might go reach back out to the scout and say, hey, there's a problem here. Okay. We need to get this fixed up here. But once it's gone about and been verified, so that's what we're looking at here. So there's going to be a stamp on it that says it's verified. Then the troop, the scout, is basically notified, hey, this is all ready to go. And they can come back up and pick up this envelope. And then what they're ready to do with this is then the Eagle Board of Review can be requested, all right, in order to finish up the last part, the last rank requirement for the Eagle Scout rank in there. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Eagle Scout Board of Review, okay? Now, one of the things is that for this in here that, the unit leaders, okay, and this could be your designee, so it's Scoutmaster or maybe advancement chair, somebody in there who is involved with this, maybe your Eagles coach that you might have in here, can go about and help arrange the board of reviews. All right, so that's kind of one of the piece in there is that it's not necessarily the sole responsibility of the scout to go about and set all these things up. They might be asked to do some parts of it, okay? First, really figure out what dates the scout's available. That's always important with that. Might be able to ask, okay, can you help us set up, I'll find a location, where this could be done with this. And one of the things is going with this is that if you are asking via email, okay, again, we need to make sure we're following the youth protection policies of the BSA. And so make sure that we, copy multiple people at that. So you're not just directly asking one adult in there. All right. Our council follows what's referred to as an in-troop board of review. All right. So what this means is that the troop, all right, the unit's going to go about and provide 2 to 5 members, okay, who will serve as the people of the board, the members of the board of review. And a couple things that we need to make sure is that, first of all the members of the board of review have to be 21 years of age or older, and it cannot be any relatives or guardians of the scout. Also cannot be any scoutmasters, okay, or assistant scoutmasters. All right. So we're looking for those people in there. All right. Also with the troop, they need to go about and provide kind of this quiet, neutral location to hold the board of review. All right. And so those are some of the things that, the unit needs to go about and provide the scout, and the candidate may help in terms of this, particularly finding that location. That's oftentimes, could be a thing that the scout's going to work on. All right. And then also for the in-troop board of review, a district representative must be present at the Eagle Board of Review. So that's going to be one of the requirements in there. Most of the time, this district representative, most of the time referred to as the DEC, District Eagle Coordinator, this is going to be the same person that met with the scout for the proposal review and approved that in there. That way, this is a person who somewhat has already met the scout and somewhat familiar with the scout in there. All right. And so that person needs to be present. If we don't, so I always go about and says, okay, the two people who have to be there, okay, is the district representative and the scout themselves. So first of all, try to figure out, all right, what dates are those two available? All right. And then as we go through and deal with this, then we try to find out, okay, let's find who other people, other board members who can go about and meet on those dates as well. So those are oftentimes other committee members, okay, of the unit, from the unit in there. All right. For the board of review, all right, the following paperwork must be present at the board of review. All right. So we want to mention here the envelope items. So what were those things that we turned in that when had to go into council when they were being verified? So we mentioned here the Eagle Project Workbook, okay, the Eagle Rank application. And one of the things that we want to make sure is that this needs to be both verified and signed by council before we can go about and have the board of review, okay? We also want to make sure that we have that requirement 6, the statement of ambitions and life purposes, okay? Other thing that also has to be brought in there is that these letters of reference, okay? And so either somebody needs to be coordinating with these, could be the district Eagle coordinator, oftentimes the committee chair, or some designee, all right? Person is normally, when the scout is asking for the letter of reference, you know, they're going to say, oh, we send them off to person X, okay? And so person X is then normally responsible to make sure that they're there, all right? The scout is expected to be in uniform at the Eagle Scout Board of Review, and the Eagle Scout Board of Review takes about an hour, all right? That's kind of the way that it's going to happen with this. And one of the things I've oftentimes, oh, what should I do with this? Well, you know, be yourself, okay? You know, they're going to ask questions that, you know, you should probably know the answer to, you know, just kind of think things through. And also there's going to be a number of questions in which there's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer. It's just kind of, you know, what's your opinion? What's your thoughts on different ideas on there? All right. There is going to be oftentimes some questions that do come up about the project. Okay. So particularly if it's a project that, you know, had happened or had gotten done a while ago, perhaps one of the things you can do is that in terms of that Eagle Scout application, or I should say the workbook, okay, there's the report section that has a bunch of different things in there. It says, hey, how did it go? What was things that were changed in there? So those would be things that would be important to talk about during, you know, the board review with it. All right. So as we go through the board review, and we're finished up with the board review, is that then the application returns to council. So we're looking here is that after the board review, all right, there needs to be kind of a decision made by the board whether the scout is approved, okay? And so if this is going to be the case, then the signed Eagle Scout rank application is returned to council in the envelope. Okay, and that's the only thing that needs to go in there. So only the signed application goes back. We don't need to go back and have the workbooks turned back in. We don't need to have the letters of reference returned to council. You don't need to have the life statement turned to council, just that rank application has been signed by the board, right? All right, and so then the letters of reference, okay, are then given to that district Eagle coordinator, and then they're going to be destroyed after the Eagle credentials have been released. One of the comments that is basically what's the purpose of the letters is that those letters, the way the BSA set it up, is that they are purely for the board members, all right? And so after the board has been completed, they are to be destroyed at that point. So that is something that the BSA has set up, all right? And so this means that the scout actually never gets to see what we're going to be inside of these letters of reference in there, right? Now, again, this is going to be here where we go about and talk about if it was approved in here. All right. Now, if the scout, if the board basically does not approve the scout for the rank of Eagle Scout, then what's going to happen with this is that all materials then are going to be returned to council. Okay. There's actually an appeals process. All right. That is automatically started as a result of this. Okay. And this is going to be something that is kind of on the onus of that, you know, the district, you know, Eagle coordinator. Okay. That district person who's going to be there. That is something that they are going to be familiar with and know how to process in that. Okay. And then there's basically going to be, the explanation of how the appeal process occurs at that point in time. Okay. Question just came in here and says, can a District Eagle coordinator run a board of review for someone that is in the troop that they are registered with? And that answer is no. Okay. If they are at that point in time, they are a troop person. They are not a district person for someone who is in their unit in there. So that is something that that is not to be done. Okay. The District Eagle person should be representing the district. Okay. And this means that they have, if they're registered with a particular unit, all right, they are actually not supposed to be the person. They're not actually, per the Guide to Advancement, they are not allowed to be the district person for the unit that they are registered with. All right. And so this is sometimes, particularly somebody who says, okay, well, I just kind of keep my registration up with this unit. I haven't been involved with them for years, but I need to still be a registered member in order to go through and deal with this and to be with this. But one of the things that it does mean that they kind of have excluded themselves from working with that particular unit in terms of being a District Eagle coordinator. All right, so that is something that is a kind of an important piece that does come up, and we do, try to make sure that never occurs in there, with stuff with that. One of the things that I've actually found out is that many of the District Eagle coordinators, what they can do is that, and this is what happens in many times, they could still be somewhat know people in different troops with that. But as long as they are not actually registered in there, many District Eagle coordinators are registered as district members at large or some specific position in their district, and so they're not actually registered with a particular unit in there. All right, so those are some stuff with that. All right, so anyway, so now we're looking here after this Eagle Board of Review. Okay, so one of the things that we'd mentioned in here is that the information that goes back is that we have the envelope and we've got the signed Eagle application. Okay, and so that's the only information that needs to go back, assuming that the scout has gone about and successfully completed that information in here. So there's going to be the line down here at the bottom where we go through here and make sure that all of the Eagle board members sign this piece, that it's all properly dated on there. All right, and so those are going to be the pieces of information that's going to go on here. And again, there's then a spot down here at the bottom that talks about here. We said the first turn in, then it says what do we need to go about and have for the second turn in. And so there's kind of a thing in there in case we forget what's happening with this. Also, the District Eagle coordinator, they're familiar with this process. They'll be able to go about and kind of help guide the unit or the scout into what's happening with that. One of the things that I always do go about and say here is that, make sure that double check the information is correct. Also, do go about here and get a copy of this before it goes back to council there. A copy of that application with all the signatures, very important, just in case for some reason, something goes missing. Okay, not that we expect it to go missing or anything like that, but scouts are prepared. All right, so those are things you want to deal with this. All right, so after the board of review, after the information has been sent back into council, council sends the application electronically down to Irving, Texas. Okay, so basically national in there. And so they will go about and kind of do the final processing of this, where the scout executive kind of signs the application. This takes a couple of different weeks to go about and for the council to hear back from the national office. And then they will go through and then kind of contact the unit in there. If you haven't heard anything back after 4 weeks, it's probably time to maybe go about and try to contact the local service center and see, hey, what's the status of this? Again, this is particularly for somebody, if they try to send out this information in email, somebody types in the email address wrong, it could be where no one gets notified with this in there. Okay. And so there's going to be, as I mentioned in here, Kathy is a great, resource to go about and to look up that information inside of there. All right. One of the things that we'll go about and kind of notice in here is that if the scout is actually not turned 18 yet, kind of the big thing to notice in here is that if you actually look inside of Scout Book goes about, and if you ever notice that the update from one rank to basically from Life to Eagle is always done at the national level. It's not done inside of the unit. It's not done at council. It's done at the national level. And so after you've gone about and turned in all that paperwork to council, kind of keep an eye out on what rank the scout is listed in terms of scout book. Once you've gone about and you see that the scout has gone through and is now listed as rank of Eagle, that's going to be when you know that the scout, that all the paperwork has been approved at that point. Okay. So national then is going to return the credentials. Basically, this is, they validate the applications. Okay. They generate the credentials, which is basically the kind of the certificate saying, hey, it's all great. You're now an Eagle Scout. Everything's all complete with this. They will go about and then send this certificate off to council. Okay. And then council will go about and notify the scout when the when they receive the certificate here, the Eagle certificate with that. And then this is going to be the time in which the scout is now officially recognized of having the rank of Eagle. And then it's at this point in time that the scout can start planning their Eagle Court of Honor. BSA goes about and mentions is that until we know for sure that it's all been processed by national, okay, the planning of the Eagle Court of Honor should not yet occur. The scout should not call themselves an Eagle Scout until they have actually heard this information in there. Okay. And one of the things with this is that we do go about here and there's a, should we hold a court of honor? Yes, you should. Okay. It's definitely the scout has done a lot of different stuff in there. They've worked on this. There's a lot of different requirements, all the different ranks that they've earned. This is, it's an important thing to go about and have the Eagle Court of Honor. And often the other thing it's going to do is going to about and inspire others, okay, to go about and earn this rank of Eagle. So that's really important for us to do this. All right. Now, last thing I think I'm going to have in here, I think this is one of the final pieces that I have, talks about Eagle Palms. Okay. So one of the things is that for every 5 merit badges, okay, beyond the 21 that are required, a scout is able to earn a palm with this. Now, in recent years, there's been a couple of changes with this. So depending upon who you've talked to and how long they've been involved with scouting, they might remember, oh, there's a couple different requirements. They've kind of changed it down recently. And so here's going to be the latest requirements, okay, or latest things for the palms. And so first of all, we're going to mention in here is that upon successfully completing your Eagle Scout Board of Review, you are entitled to an Eagle Palm for every 5 merit badges that you've completed before your Eagle Board of Review. All right. So if a scout has gone about and has, we'll say 26 merit badges, all right, that's 5 more than the 21 that's needed. Well, that's 1 palm. All right. So that's kind of how it works on here. And now after you become an Eagle Scout, you can earn additional palms by completing the following. Basically going about here and demonstrate Scout spirit by living the Scout oath and law, accept responsibility or demonstrating leadership. One of the things that I also should note inside of here is that it does not explicitly state that there needs to have a particular position inside of the unit. Okay. It says just demonstrating leadership. So pretty much like for the Star, Life, and Eagle, there was certain, you had to be the patrol leader or the senior patrol leader or the assistant senior patrol leader, or you had to be the scribe. There's a number of different position patches that needed to be held in here. This is made much more open on that. So this is something that how have they gone about and demonstrated leadership in the unit? It doesn't say they actually have to have a position, nor does it state that there's any sort of length of time that they have to do this. They just have had to go about and demonstrate leadership in the unit, all right? And that they've gone about here, and really the big one is those 5 additional merit badges. Okay, so 5 additional merit badges, either from being Eagle Scout or from that last palm. So let's say that a scout has 34 merit badges, okay, at their, at the date of their Eagle Scout Board of Review, all right? So this means that's 13 more than the 21 needed for the rank in there. So that means that the scout has earned 2 different palms, okay, for 10 of those 13 merit badge. Once the scout earns 2 more merit badges, all right, the scout's now going to have 15 we'll say extra merit badge. So that's going to be the third palm. All right. And then once the scout has earned another 5 more after that, okay, and completes any other different requirements in there, the scout will go about and earn a palm in there. All right. And then so we can go about and enter this information. Scout book, internet advancement. There used to always be some sort of had to be a certain amount of time, and that time has been removed, from earning the palms in there. All right. So with this, that's going to be all the information that I have. And so now we'll go about here and try to figure out if there's any sort of questions that anyone might have for the thing in here. All right. And one of the other things is that if anybody is looking for anything or something comes up or you want to go about and maybe get a hold of the slide deck or something like that, there's my email address. Okay. Feel free to reach out and send this information on there. All right. So a question just came up in the chat. Is there a format for a letter of recommendation? Also, is there an expiration date? And so, yeah, no, there actually isn't. There is the form. There's a suggested form of the application letter, but it's suggested. It's not required. So anything can be used with this. And then also, is kind of the question is asked in there. It says, if I were to ask for a letter of recommendation now, but don't have my board of review like for 6 to 8 months, are the letters still valid? And the answer is yes. I have certainly known scouts that have gone about and asked for letters of recommendation kind of on the early side with this. Particularly, let's say they wanted to go about and kind of the big thing is, let's say there's somebody they wanted to ask a letter of recommendation from, maybe like a sports coach that they might know of, or somebody they work with, or maybe a teacher at school, or maybe somebody, let's say a pastor or something like that at their church. But maybe these people are retiring or moving somehow. They're changing around. They're not going to be there in a few months down the road, or they're going to be harder to contact with that. So they are going to be people that they are you can ask early on there. So that's certainly a thing with that, is that if you can ask early, okay, you should go about and not ask them before you're a Life Scout, okay, because that is part of the thing in here. It says, okay, doing these requirements while you're a Life Scout is how it's being set up in there. So those are some things that we want to mention in there. All right, very good. Okay, any other questions or anything else that we have with that? And at this point, I'm going to come down here and try to, we'll turn off our recording with that, assuming I can go about and properly find where that right spot is going to be in here. All right. And so we'll stop our recording.